What up, though? It's your brother Mike X, and welcome to another episode of 17 Winners Podcast. As you can see, I'm dolo today on this episode, partly because we had a snowstorm recently here in Michigan, and a couple of my guests were coming from out of town, and were not able to make it due to the highway conditions. Also because, just quite frankly, things didn't fall in line for a couple of people, but I did not want to not produce an episode of the podcast, first and foremost, and second of all, because of what I went through or experienced in a meeting that I just came through, which I'll talk about in a second. It was the Michigan School-Based Community Violence Intervention webinar. After coming through that, I didn't want to skip this conversation, even if I just had the conversation by myself, because today's topic is the impact of the formerly incarcerated on CVI work. Some of my listeners may or may not know what CVI work is. Others may. CVI work is important to me as reentry is important to me. Those two have been my two passion points, or my main pillars of work, so to speak, because largely I believe that if there would have been some level of a buffer between myself and, the incarceration path that I went down, in the sense of credible messengers, individuals in my community that took time to be a part of my life and do their best to help me to navigate it. I think that would have helped me in my development. And then, of course, the reentry side of things is I recognize how traumatic prison is. And the return from prison can be just as traumatic, especially if you don't have support and community to wrap around you. When I originally wrote my book, the recidivism in Michigan was at 44%. In large part due because there was no community support, community wraparounds to catch these people once they come home from the penitentiary, to help get back on a right path in life. Also brings me to another conversation that's being had on social media, and I even made a video about it, but talking about the celebration of individuals once they come home from prison. There is this idea that people are celebrated after prison, and sometimes it is a celebration, but the reality is more times than not, it's just support, and the fact that your family has missed you. But we'll get into that a little bit more. Like I said, today's conversation is the formerly incarcerated impact on CVI. This is going to be a part one because I want to talk to some other individuals throughout the state who are doing CVI work in their communities. At the same time, I'm doing CVI work right here in Lansing, so I think I have a good read on what CVI is looking like, how it's going, how I go about doing the CVI work that I do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And yeah, so what up, though? Y'all here with me? So that being said, the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the meeting that I just went to. So there was a webinar held by, I want to make sure and get the names right. So just a second, let me look at my phone, get these names right. So there was a meeting held by Michigan Transformation Collective, End Gun Violence Michigan, and Force Detroit. They just recently did a webinar that was the Michigan School-Based Community Violence Intervention discussion on the budget for CVI work in Michigan that just passed the legislature. I don't know, it hasn't even been like 2 months. But there has been $10 million essentially allocated to CVI through the school aid fund, right? So the school aid fund is essentially through the school districts of each individual county that are implementing some level of CVI work in their school district, and that's how the money is to be distributed. They have to do some level of collaboration with established CVI organizations, but outside of that, they basically are granting the money directly to schools. You know, there are a few ways to feel about that. I personally don't do work directly with schools, so that kind of stood up as a red flag for me, only because if the only way for us to get access to funding is through the school, then, and I don't do work directly with the schools, I work directly with those quote unquote at-risk youth. How do I get assistance? How do I get support and resources to back up the work that I'm doing, right? So that was the first red flag to me. But inside of this conversation, there were a lot of valuable points, and I want to break down a couple of them. First and foremost, I want to read what was given as the like the blanket definition of what community violence is. So it says, what is community violence intervention? CVI refers to a set of evidence-based, community-led strategies that identify and support individuals at the highest risk of being involved in or affected by gun violence. CVI professionals work to interpret cycles of violence through relationships, credible messengers, trauma-responsive services, and coordinated supports. CVI focuses on immediate risk, relationship-based intervention, and behavior change, often delivered by trusted community partners who have lived experience and deep ties to the neighborhoods they serve. Now, that is an important definition for CVI, especially when we're talking about how the funds are being applied, because I think one thing that is coming up as a red flag for a lot of the CVI organizations is this money going to be diverted just to the school officers versus being put into the people who are actually doing the work on the ground? So, and I'm not sure if this definition is something that is a like statewide representative definition, or if it's the definition of the collective of the organizations that put this webinar together, or if it's just Force Detroit. So like those are some conversations that I like to have and find out some more information about. But regardless, I think that that's a good functional definition of CVI. I think the key points of what CVI represent is credible messengers and trauma responsive services. Credible messengers. I know there has been a lot of controversy in regards to who are credible messengers when it comes to CVI. I personally, I say this because I don't want to beat anybody up, especially when I'm talking, because I know that I'm speaking from both the Lansing specific area as well as a statewide area look or purview. So with that being said, like from the local standpoint, from the Lansing standpoint, I know a lot comes up as to who are credible messengers and how that vetting goes. From my perspective, if you ain't never shot nobody, I don't see how you do CVI work. I mean, that's just flat out like, you ain't never bust your gun, so how do you get into the mind of a young person who busts their gun? How you tell me that there's a better way to handle this if you ain't never been faced with this situation and chose that better way, or been faced with this situation and chose the wrong way and got the consequences from doing it the wrong way, and then recognize that that wasn't the right way to move. Like, that's where I feel like CVI is the most effective. If that's not what CVI represents, then I'm not sure that you're doing CVI as much as you may feel like you are. Now, that being said, there is a local organization here in Lansing doing CVI work, and they get a lot of criticism for who they have on their team. I recognize the validity of the criticism while also recognizing the validity of the work that they're doing. Regardless of whether or not you busted your gun, per se, the men and women that represent CVI work here in the Lansing area, and shit, it ain't like I'm sponsored by nobody. I ain't got no problem saying their name. I'm talking about Advanced Peace here in Lansing. I have been a supporter of Advanced Peace. I have been, in meetings with them. I show up to places. If they call me, I'm gonna be there. I do the mentor meetings with them. And I recognize that they are doing something that a lot of us, including myself, ain't doing. And that is going out there, and whether they shot guns at people or not in their younger years, they were in the street and they were connected, and they know people who have been, and they are, more importantly, getting out there and being in the mix. So I throw my hat of support behind them, in spite of what other criticism that may exist behind them. But I also do my own form of CVI work, and I believe that my form of CVI work is also effective in the sense that I do direct engagement in the community. I represent, so I started an organization that is actually still in the infant stages, called New Lansing. And actually, let me pull up that definition for y'all, because I want y'all to get a better understanding of that, actually, since I'm sitting here kicking it. And that's the thing about the Dolo podcast, too. I'm not a talk to myself type of person, right? I'm not a talk to the phone type of person. So it's been hard for me to get into the mind of a content creator and grabbing my phone and talking. So y'all bear with me. I think this is probably going to be my first episode by myself, but I plan on continuing to come in and have these conversations because I believe a lot of the information that I'm bringing to the forefront is valuable information. So stay tuned with me for that. But yeah, let me find this New Lansing breakdown so that I can talk about that a little bit, because I think that's valuable information as well. People that are listening to my podcast would like to know some of that as well. So when we talk about CVI, and specifically, like I said, today's episode is about formerly incarcerated and how we affect CVI work. Like I said, I personally was a gun buster. I was personally someone who committed violence in my youth. I had the core belief system that the violence that I committed made sense. It was not out of the ordinary. And the cyclical retaliatory violence that happens was a part of my life for several years before I started making changes in my life and started doing things that would help me to get to where I am now. All of that being said, I believe that formerly incarcerated individuals are probably the most important piece of CVI work. I won't say the only piece, because there are other things where in collaborative work we can all help, because there are other people who are like victims of gun violence or have seen gun, so there are different levels of this thing. At the same time, though, I think you have to have the trauma and all of the things that go along with being involved in community violence to be able to express that to these young people. So that being said, I created an organization. Like I said, the organization is New Lansing, but I do a CVI outreach that I call Hood to Hood. First, I have to give a shout out to Zeke out in Detroit with New Era Detroit and their Hood to Hood, their neighborhood business, because that's where I got this idea originally from. It was direct outreach, and I went to Detroit for a couple of weekends and spent some time with the CVI organizations in Detroit to learn what exactly they were doing and see what would apply here to Lansing, because everything ain't going to apply the same way in my city as it did in others, right? So Shout out to Zeke and Hood to Hood, as well as Force Detroit. Hell, there's several of them. We the People Detroit. Man, and if I'm forgetting a few of y'all, that's all right, because I plan on having a conversation with y'all. I expect emails from me soon, right? But and even Glam, because Glam is in Detroit, but they're also in Kalamazoo, and they'll be coming here to Lansing, which is Girls Loving Our Wisdom, which is CVI outreach, but it's from the feminine perspective, because young women in our communities are the fastest growing to go to the penitentiary. So we got some sisters that's out and fighting that fight. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Hood to Hood and what I've been doing with it, what I did with it last year, and what I plan on doing with it this year. So because this is my podcast and I get to talk how I want to, I'm just going to talk y'all through some of my plans and some of the work that we've done in CVI. And this is just off the top, right? So Hood to Hood is youth empowerment, community engagement, and community violence interruption. New Lansing is a movement rooted in love for Lansing and a collective commitment to uplift the city through shared values, equitable community responsibility, and cultural expression. We champion music, arts, activism, and representation at every level, affirming that everyone, no matter their position, has a role in shaping the city's future. Above all, New Lansing stands for integrity and solidarity, a unified push for the more just, vibrant, and empowered Lansing. So basically, it's really about just making sure that the city is all connected and lined up on one accord, right? And even if we don't all agree on the same thing, we have the core value of what's best for the city and making sure that we include everybody in the city. Lansing, unlike Detroit, has a more mixed population, and we have struggled a lot with being able to get some level of solidarity amongst our Black, brown, and poor populations. We get split by so many different dynamics, and it may be something that I have a conversation on this podcast about one day, but maybe not. It might not fit the platform. Either way, though, I will say it is a different monster working here in Lansing than it would be working in a city that's predominantly Black, because you have to mix and mingle and be able to see everybody, right? So Hood to Hood is a grassroots community outreach initiative designed to build trust, presence, and relationships in Lansing's highest risk neighborhoods. On select days throughout the summer, New Lansing staff, volunteers, and partners go directly into communities to provide essential items such as hygiene products, school supplies, toys, food, and information about available services. So some of that stuff. So basically what I did was there's this organization called Lansing Empowerment Network, where every Wednesday we do what they call a Lansing 360 meeting that discusses gun violence in the city and solutions to the gun violence and how we can address that. Inside of one of these meetings, there was a call for some level of direct response in the Willow neighborhood in Lansing. Over, I don't know, maybe 3 months' time or something like that, there were 24 shootings in that specific corridor of the city, and there was not a lot being done to address the circumstances in that community, because that area of the city is not new to that level of crime, violence, and drugs. So because it's such a long-standing issue, it was as if it was being ignored. And inside one of the Lansing 360 meetings, there was a call, and people asked, how can we, get out there? How can we touch them? How can we change that dynamic? In my mind, part of changing the dynamic was to engage with the community, right? To just actually be in the community. most of the time that there's like stuff happening in our communities, nobody's paying attention, nobody's there. It's the broken window theory that like if nobody fixes it, then it continues to get worse, and people add and compile more onto it. So, from my perspective, I just felt like nobody went to that neighborhood and to other neighborhoods around here to just show love, to just rebuild community. At the same time, I worked for two organizations. Well, at the time, I worked for two organizations. I worked for A Brighter Way, which is peer navigation, um, peer elevated and educated reentry services. So we work here in Lansing at 835 Louisa Street, and we do, like I said, peer navigation. If you've been formerly incarcerated or you are justice impacted, you can come to our offices and we will have a conversation with you and help to navigate you to whatever resources that you may need in order to be successful in your transition home, right? So like that was one company that I worked for, and then I was also a facilitator and the curriculum writer of a program that I worked with at Peckham, which is also like a reentry organization here in Lansing, but they were dealing directly with young people ages 18 to 24 in it was similar to CVI work in that we were dealing with and are dealing with young people 18 to 24 who are system adjacent or quote unquote at risk. And that program was a 6-week program. Actually, it's a full year program, but my portion with my curriculum is a 6-week program. The curriculum is called I Am Somebody, where we talk about critical thinking, ethical decision making, and problem solving. So those two programs that I worked for, I felt like just opening up access to those two in the community and just showing love. Like I said, I didn't have much to offer, so I literally went out and just got tents and chairs and reached out to a couple of people. I got some good support in the community and was able to lock in with Hank's Cuisines for a couple of weeks, and we passed out free food. We just gave away grilled hot dogs and chips and water. While giving away the free food, I also gave away my business card and told people to come see us at a Brighter Way, or we signed up young people on a sign-up sheet for this youth program that we had. So that was where Hood to Hood started. So I did that for 2 weeks in the Willow Corridor, and I finished out the rest of the summer here in Lansing, just doing that every Saturday, going to a at-risk neighborhood, setting up my tents and turning on some music and letting the people in that neighborhood know what services we offered and were available, and giving away free food. So we did about 5 of them over the summer 2025, and we were able to partner with a few people, A&B Tobacco, Eastside Fish Fry, to name a few, who were willing to help give away free food to people while we were giving away access to these these services that I worked for. And also, so that was Hood to Hood. That's what we did with Hood to Hood. But so that's not the only level of CVI work that I do, right? So that was the hood. That was the engagement part. But I also do a young entrepreneurs conference, wherein I have basically it's a hands-on program that gives youth exposure to local entrepreneurs, practical business knowledge, and the resources needed to turn ideas into action. So once a year, I just do a young entrepreneurs conference. Again, I started that this year, 2025, with a few entrepreneurs from the area, with the idea of just exposing young people to the conference environment and the business environment that I had not had been exposed to before prison. that a lot of people that I know have not been exposed to still today. When I'm going to these different conferences and I'm jumping on planes and I'm going to see these different places, I'm getting to have an experience and have conversations with people who are in higher levels than me and who are doing things that I want to do, and it gives me motivation. It gives me more information. So I wanted to bring that back home to our young people to inspire them. So that's another part of the new Lansing programs. And then the last one I just talked about a little bit with the I Am Somebody critical thinking and ethical decision-making curriculum. It was originally built for the Peckham Go program, but it's a curriculum that can be pulled and adapted to essentially any established organization. And it's basically a structured program designed to help youth recognize their value, improve decision-making, and build character. It's between 6 to 24 weeks, depending on, the intensity of it and how far we want to go, because the Peckham Go program is for 18 to 24-year-olds, but I believe that we can get them as young as 12 and start imparting some of this information in them. So yeah, last year we did the Young Entrepreneurs Conference and we did a few of the Hood to Hoods. And this year coming up, the plan is to do it bigger. The Young Entrepreneurs Conference is going to be planned for April this year. I would love to be able to have like at least 3 or 4 different entrepreneurs that are doing. I got a couple of subjects that I want to talk about that I want to bring to the forefront. So at least a couple entrepreneurs doing those things. I want to feed the young people. I want them to get another experience. And then after that, we want to kick off the Hood to Hood with a 517-day picnic, because I want to jump that off. Of course, I'm new Lance and everything, so I want to do the picnic on 517 day and just get us started for the season of Hood to Hood. And then starting in June, we're going to do Hood to Hood Day. So I'm going to map out a couple of neighborhoods and a couple of people that we can partner with. And we're going to be in the neighborhoods all summer long, June, July, and August. I want to wrap up August with a block party at the end of August. And I also want to sometime in September do a back to school giveaway. So we got a lot planned for New Lansing, and this is all just me by myself, right? Formerly incarcerated, feeling like I don't want young people to go through the things that I went through, to have to experience what I went through, to not feel connected to a community, because that's where I really got this whole New Lansing thing from. I grew up in the crack era, and I didn't grow up feeling community. I didn't grow up feeling like I had, hell, I still don't have those like shooting marbles friends. I don't have a from the playground to adulthood friends. So I recognize that as being a large part of the problem with our community, is that we don't have community anymore. So like New Lansing is about bringing back community, but it's also about just like being a representative, being out there and being seen, so the young people can see the options that they have. Because in large part, I just really didn't see that I had options growing up. But yeah, man, hey, I don't even really have much else that I wanted to talk about other than that thing. Just talk about the CVI work that I do, and just make sure that I was able to speak up. I'll tell y'all a little bit more about this meeting that I had, though. How about that? So another thing about CVI work that was explained is that CVI, or community violence, is violence that takes place in a public setting. So I do recognize one challenge for CVI workers is that it's hard for us that are formerly incarcerated to get inside the schools. That's part of the reason why I don't even attempt to get into the schools, because I understand the precaution, because hell, I'm a toddler dad. I don't want just anybody having access to my sons either. At the same time, there needs to be some level of a vetting process brought about that would allow for more of a streamlined process to get that door open, because the bulk of people doing CVI work are formerly incarcerated. I mean, it just don't really make sense. The people who want to do this work are people who feel like the community let them down, and they don't want to let down future members of the community. That's really what CVI work boils down to. Yeah, that's really what CVI work boils down to, is like not wanting the children that come up behind you to have to go through what you went through because you recognize that your community failed you. And that's big, and it's usually us that's wanting to do this work. It's usually us that's willing to get out here and get in front of these youngsters with guns and explain to them the value of their lives, explain to them that, like, this ain't worth your life. This ain't worth you dying over. CVI centers around the use of credible messengers and a trauma-responsive service. Man, that credible messenger piece, I have to stick to the gun, that if you ain't bust a gun, you probably ain't no CVI worker. Like, I don't know. I also hear a lot when it comes to CVI about working with police. That's something that I ain't with also. Actually, I don't even understand nobody that like been to the penitentiary and come home wanting to change their life and think that they should be partners with the police. Where the fuck did that come from? Where do y'all get that shit from? Like, I know this ain't the topic or nothing like that, but it kind of fits, because I see that in the CVI space, is that a lot of y'all think that working with the police is some damn badge of honor. Where the fuck y'all get that from? Like, that's still the wrong side of the line for me. We still ain't on the same team. Just because I don't want violence in my community, or I don't want young men to shoot each other or to be shooting and hurting innocent people in my community, don't mean that I'm on the same side as the motherfucking police. The police don't necessarily want that. That ain't necessarily what their goal is. That's what their stated goal is, that they trying to stop the crime and violence. But the reality is, no crime and violence means no use for police. So they don't want to stop crime and violence. And they police the shit out of us. They don't just do the job. They police certain communities over and over again. I can literally drive through certain neighborhoods and I know I'm going to see the police 5 motherfucking times in that neighborhood. And if I go over here to this other neighborhood, I won't see the police at all. Like, that's systemic. There ain't nowhere in this game where the police and me is gonna be on the same side. And I think any of y'all CVI that do CVI work that think you on the same side as the police, nigga, you the police. Flat out. Like, I ain't on no police team. Now, I'm probably going to say something on this mug while I'm talking by myself that's going to get me in some trouble, but I ain't tripping about that either. That's what you get getting me stuck in this room by myself, is just having conversations, because I get to going off into, some of the thoughts that I've been having, and that is what that is. I think that's probably why I like Deontay Kyle so much in the Grits and Eggs podcast, because bro just get to going, and I ain't never really been the type to talk to myself in that manner, but shit, I think I can get used to it, man. I just sat up in here for about a half hour, almost an hour talking, so we'll see, man. Y'all stay tapped in. This episode, I'm definitely going to drop it. I'm going to definitely make sure y'all see this, and free to real. Make sure y'all get my book, First 10 Moves to Forever Freedom. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Who should I be having a conversation with about CVI work in Michigan? And what other conversations y'all think I should be having on the podcast? That being said, y'all know what time it is. Free to real. Keep the rest.